This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight now, we bring you a special program on the valor of Indian Armed Forces and Bangladesh Liberation War.
In the days of war, the sun does not rise. The world over, it is always night. On one such fateful night on 26th March 1971, the Pakistani army led by General Tika Khan began carrying out a blood-curdling 2-month-long genocide in East Pakistan under the code Operation Searchlight. During this operation, 30 lakh Bengalis were killed, while around 10 million fled to neighboring India as refugees. Major General Farman Ali, who served General Tika Khan, wrote in his diary, "The green soil of East Pakistan turned red. On this very red soil emerged Operation Lily Cactus, as the survivors of then East Pakistan formed the proverbial butchers." Yes, Lily Cactus is the Indian Army's strategy against Pakistan Army in 1971 war, and is widely acknowledged as a sterling example of operational excellence. The brutal ethnic cleansing and enormous influx of refugees to India resulted in 13 days war between India and Pakistan, which culminated with the rise of a new nation-state of Bangladesh. For the first time in the history of World War II, a new nation-state was born in this manner.
The voice of not one but a million was the bush singing the bill, and the field of sky with the echoes ringing. Bangladesh, my Bangladesh, Bangladesh, my Bangladesh.
Over 93,000 prisoners of war were taken, and the Pakistani army suffered a humiliating and decisive defeat. The India-Pakistan War of 1971 opened formally on the evening of 3rd December, following a preemptive strike by Pakistani Air Force on the Indian airfields in the west. Within hours, both western and eastern fronts erupted into fighting. The then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, in an address to the nation from All India Radio, declared all-out war against Pakistan in both fronts.
आपसे मैं एक खतरे के समय बोल रही हूँ। कुछ ही घंटे पहले करीब 5:30 बजे शाम के 3 दिसंबर को पाकिस्तान ने हमारे ऊपर एक हमला किया। अब ये बांग्लादेश पर जो पश्चिमी पाकिस्तान की लड़ाई थी, वो लड़ाई भारत पर भी आ गई है। मुझे संदेह नहीं है कि सारी भारत की जनता, सब राजनीतिक दल और सब नागरिक इस समय एक हैं। सबका संकल्प है कि इस हमले का निर्णयात्मक ढंग से समाप्त कर दिया जाए। जय हिंद।
Banga Bandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman declared the struggle this time was for freedom and independence, the innermost desire of 7 crore Bengalis.
তোমাদের যা কিছু আছে তাই নিয়ে শত্রুর মোকাবেলা করতে হবে এবং রাস্তাঘাট যা যা আছে সব কিছু আমি যদি হুকুম দিতে না পারি তোমরা বন্ধ করে দেবে। আমরা ভাতে মারবো, আমরা পানিতে মারবো, তোমরা আমার ভাই, তোমরা বেড়াকে থাকো, কেউ তোমাদের কিছু বলবে না, কিন্তু আর আমার বুকের উপর গুলি চালাবার চেষ্টা করো না। 7 কোটি মানুষকে চাপায় রাখতে পারবো না।
New Delhi announced its recognition of Bangladesh on the 6th December 1971 and set up a joint command of the Mukti Bahini and Indian forces. While both sides retained the bulk of the forces in the west, it was in East Pakistan that the decisive battle was fought. The Chief of Army Staff, General Sam Manekshaw, later explained that a winter campaign would reduce the chance of Chinese intervention as passes of the Himalayas would be snowed shut. At the same time, the ground in Bangladesh would be firm and most favorable for armor and mechanized movements.
In the 1971 conflict, the operations were planned in the minutest detail. From the time that Yahya Khan crashed down on East Pakistan and refugees started pouring in, we knew that we would have to do something so that the refugees could go back. Now, when to do it was the question. It could have been done earlier on in April or May, but we were not ready. I had to concentrate my troops. The monsoon was about to break. The Himalayan passes would be open, and I would have to look at the Chinese front.
Echoing the same tune, Lieutenant General J.F.R. Jacob, who was spearheading the operation in Eastern Command, said October-April period was the best time to launch an offensive.
I was under great pressure from the army headquarters to move into Bangladesh in April because the government were pushing the chief, and the chief was pushing us. I explained to him that there's no way we could move in April because we were mountain divisions. We had no bridges, we had no adequate transport, the monsoon was about to break, and we didn't have the logistics. So I was asked for a brief which I sent to Sam Manekshaw, which he read out to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister agreed to postpone it till after 15 November.
The area of operational focus was clearly designated. The IAF decimated Pakistan's air component in the east and won virtual air supremacy. This enabled a classic airland campaign to develop in Bangladesh, the riverine terrain of Bangladesh, a nightmare for any attacker. 3 Indian corps were involved in the liberation of East Pakistan. They were supported by nearly 3 brigades of Mukti Bahini fighting alongside them, and many more were fighting as irregulars. The Indians quickly overran the country selectively, engaging or bypassing heavily defended strongholds. Pakistani forces were unable to effectively counter the Indian attack, as they had been deployed in small units around the border to counter the guerrilla attacks by the Mukti Bahini.
Indian Air Force and the Navy had the overwhelming superiority over the Pakistani Navy and Air Force. The Pakistani Air Force was neutralized by IAF on the second day of the war.
The move prevented Pakistani plans to reinforce Dhaka. Former Vice Air Marshal Manmohan Bahadur Singh said the pinpoint bombing on Hotel Hilton by the IAF, where Pakistani High Command hierarchy was to meet, invoked fear in the mind of General Niazi and forced him to surrender.
The Indian Air Force played a vital role in the liberation of erstwhile East Pakistan and the formation of a new country, Bangladesh. The biggest contribution of the Indian Air Force was that it got air supremacy over the skies of Dhaka and then East Pakistan within 2 days. And with that, it was ensured that the Indian Army, which was doing the ground offensive, had no strikes coming from the air. So their airspace was clear, and while our own Air Force was striking targets of Pakistan Army on the ground with impunity and destroying them, and greatly helped the fast movement of the Indian Army. Secondly, the transport and helicopter fleets of the Indian Air Force did a marvelous job in helping the Army leapfrog over the riverine terrain. There are a very large number of small and big rivers in Bangladesh. So the famous Tangail airdrop by transport aircraft and the Meghna river crossing, heli-lifting of troops by the Indian Air Force, helped Indian Army formations envelop Pakistani Army formations and their structures on ground from all around. The other point was that the famous strike on 14th of December by Indian Air Force fighter aircraft, MiGs and Hunters, MiGs having taken off from Air Force Station Guwahati, to strike the governor's palace while a meeting was on, presided over by the governor, and that hastened the surrender of the Pakistani forces to our army.
The Indian Navy, despite its relatively small size, successfully accomplished its mission of isolating East Pakistan from the sea, blocking Pakistani attempts to supply or reinforce its beleaguered forces in East Pakistan. Indian Navy deployed the sole aircraft carrier INS Vikrant in the Bay of Bengal, from whose deck its flight of Sea Hawks carried out bombing of the port of Chalna, Chittagong and Cox's Bazar, and carried naval blockade at Karachi port in the west.
Rear Admiral S.K. Gupta, one of the heroes of the 1971 naval war in Eastern Front, opined that despite the modest size of air and naval forces committed on the Eastern Front, they nonetheless contributed handsomely towards the success of the Indian campaign.
The 1971 Indo-Pak War would be long remembered as a very unique event. For one reason, the Indian Navy took the war into the enemy territory in both sectors, the west and the east. Never has it happened before that the Indian Navy has participated so actively in attacking both the ports on the east and the western parts of Pakistan. And this is all the more admirable because the fleet was really quite thin, especially on the eastern sector, where it was just INS Vikrant, an old aircraft carrier with also inch-old aircraft, which had more or less outlived their lives, and yet formed the nucleus or the strike force in eastern Pakistan that actually liberated Bangladesh. In all, it was just one aircraft carrier, about 4 ships with escorts, and yet within a period of 13 or 14 days, they strangulated the port of Chittagong, and nothing was allowed to come in or go out from East Pakistan. And there was left no option, the own army and air force attacking from the land side, and no escape from the seaward side. With constant attacks from the INS Vikrant aircraft, they had to but surrender.
Finally, Major General J.F.R. Jacob, the key liberator of Bangladesh, played a pivotal role to negotiate the surrender with Niazi at headquarters in Dhaka. It was Jacob who converted the instrument of surrender into an unconditional laying down of arms by 93,000 troops in public and compelled Niazi to agree to sign the draft.
I'm very sympathetic to the sufferings imposed by the Pak army onto the population of Bangladesh. They murdered, raped, they were terrible. I have to raise the Mukti forces and train them, and I planned the offensive into Bangladesh, and also I built up the logistics for the war. It was a brilliant campaign because I made this guy surrender in front of the people of Dhaka, a public surrender, the only one in history.
The instrument of surrender of Pakistani forces stationed in East Pakistan was signed at the Ramna race course in what is now Dhaka on December 16, 1971 by Lieutenant General Niazi of Pakistan and Lieutenant General Arora of India.
On the ground, Pakistan suffered the most with 8,000 killed and 25,000 wounded, while India lost 3,000 and 12,000 were wounded. The loss of armoured vehicles was similarly imbalanced. It was a major defeat for Pakistan.
Bangladesh emerged an independent nation after a prolonged bloodbath. Mujibur Rahman was released from a West Pakistani prison and he returned to Dhaka on January 10, 1972 and became the first president of Bangladesh.
বিশ্বকবির সোনার বাংলা নজরুলের বাংলাদেশ জীবনানন্দের রূপসী বাংলা রূপের যে তার নেই কোশিস বাংলাদেশ বিশ্বকবির সোনার বাংলা নজরুলের বাংলাদেশ জীবনানন্দের রূপসী বাংলা রূপের যে তার নেই কোশিস বাংলাদেশ.
As we enter into the golden jubilee year of the liberation of Bangladesh, a salute to the brave hearts from Indian Army, Air Force and Navy, who not only protected the motherland, but hit back with the precision and played a key role in the birth of a new nation.
শোনো একটি মুজিবরের থেকে লক্ষ মুজিবরের কণ্ঠ স্বরের ঝড়ের ধ্বনি প্রতিধ্বনি আকাশে বাতাসে ওঠে রুনি.
You were listening to a special program on the valor of Indian Armed Forces and Bangladesh Liberation War. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.